Welcome to Entrepreneurship at Rowan, an official production of the award-winning Rowan Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We cover the entrepreneurial pulse of Rowan students, faculty, and alumni. Prepare to be Rowan proud.
Hello, Rowan University. My name is Madison Miller, and I am your host for Season 5 of the Entrepreneurship at Rowan podcast, where we'll be focusing on creative entrepreneurs. Today, I'm here with Colleen Kendrick, CEO of Nonprofit Partners, host of the Mom Shuffle podcast, and adjunct professor here at Rowan University. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to chat with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I saw that you do a lot of different creative projects. You are a creative entrepreneur in so many different industries. So to start off, I just want to say that your portfolio of work and projects is so impressive. You know, you have a lot of really cool things going on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been 25 years now, incredibly, that I've been working since I finished my undergrad. If you had asked me 25 years ago what my career would look like, I would have had no idea that I would have been involved in the projects that I'm involved in now or have been involved in over my career. And so I've been very lucky, but I've also been very persistent about trying new things, which I think is something that is at the heart of a creative entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's just hop right into it. Would you be able to sort of walk me through that exciting career journey and sort of get us to where you are now with Nonprofit Partners?
Of course, yeah. And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, it's not a linear journey. I think a lot of us, especially creative entrepreneurs who are really trying to figure out where to direct their energies and their creativity, it's not really a path that's just laid out that you follow. I think you sort of find your way. And so when I did my undergraduate work in Philadelphia at Temple University, originally started as a journalism student because I loved to write. I still love to write all these years later, and thought that was going to be how I built my career. And what I quickly learned is that journalism felt like too much of a box for me. I couldn't be creative enough. I couldn't always pursue the things I wanted to pursue. I couldn't interact with people, and I'm a pretty extroverted personality. And so I started thinking about how could I take those skills around creative writing and journalism and use them in a broader sense, which is what led me to marketing. And that's where I finished out my degree in marketing, have been in marketing for the 25 years since, but in a variety of different ways. And so when I first graduated, I did what a lot of people did. I looked for a job in corporate America. I worked for an organization called AC Moore Arts and Crafts. At the time, it was a large East Coast competitor to Michaels. They have since, they were sold from the family that founded them and have since sold off and gone out of business. I learned a lot in that job because I came into a marketing and advertising department that had a whole bunch of graphic designers working on advertising and me as the marketing person. And so really, along with some colleagues that got pulled in from some of the store locations and things, figured out how to build a marketing department. You know, you learn a lot when you're starting from scratch and you're building it. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. I spent a number of years there before doing what I think a lot of students do, go, maybe I should get my master's. Maybe I missed school a little bit. And so I actually started my master's program at Rutgers in Camden. And was sort of, again, doing what a lot of young people do. Maybe I want to do something else. And so I got to thinking that, it was really time to maybe get out of this area. I've grown up in the Philadelphia area. And so I transferred my credits and I went to California. And I had a close friend of mine from my undergrad who was out there. And I moved out there and I said, I'm going to work and I'm going to pursue my MBA, which is exactly what I did. I started out there doing some work for a company called Party America, which was a corporate turnaround. We were essentially trying to save the company and turn it around to sell it to Party City, which is exactly what we did. We are a very large team of us nationally with 900 and some stores. Ironically, now Party City is actually going out of business. So it's crazy to kind of watch that evolution have happened over the last 20 years in that industry. But as we were kind of navigating that turnaround, I was starting to think about what was next for me in my career. It had been around that time that my grandmother, who I was very close with, had brain cancer and had passed away. And so I started to think, could I use my marketing powers for good? How could I get away from selling arts and crafts and party supplies and things that brought joy to people, but to do something meaningful? And right around that time, a position came available at the American Cancer Society there in the Bay Area to lead Northern California's marketing communications. And I was like, that's it. That's the thing. Like, right, this is the time. Things in my life have aligned. I've been thinking about how to sort of do something meaningful. My grandma had recently passed to cancer. I took that job, and that job literally changed the whole trajectory of my career, because once you start using that creative power and negotiating skills and different things like that, you sort of get addicted to this idea that you're doing it for good, for larger good. And for me, it's always really been about the greater good. And so I spent a number of years doing that, had an absolute blast, learned a lot there. When I moved back to the East Coast after that job, after I had finished my MBA, I took a similar position at the American Heart Association here. I would have stayed with the Cancer Society, but there wasn't a role available at the time in this market, and did that here for a number of years before I realized I wanted to get married and have kids and have a little bit more of a regular schedule. Nonprofit marketing inside an organization can be challenging because lots of nights and weekends and things like that. And so I went at the time to work for what was called Lourdes Health System, which is now part of Virtua. So lots of mergers and acquisitions of organizations over the course of my career. It's been a really interesting evolution to watch these industries change, and spent a lot of years there before deciding that I wanted to go back and get my doctorate. And that was purely just personal ambition. I had no reason to get my doctorate. There was no career reward beyond that. It was something I'd always wanted to do. At the time, my children were young. My youngest was 18 months. My oldest was 3.5. And I kept thinking, if I could do it now, then I could be done it by the time they were really involved in their activities and things. And so it was really difficult to do that with young children. Crazy appreciation for my husband for keeping us fed for all those years. But it was the right thing. It led me here to be able to contribute at Rowan in the marketing department, in the healthcare department, in entrepreneurship on the advisory council, and with kind of student mentorship. And so, like I said, long, meandering path, still doing a variety of things. I don't think I'll ever be able to do one job. I'm just not built that way. But somehow I think I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
That is such an inspiring journey. And I'm so sorry to hear about your grandmother, but it's so inspiring that you were able to take that pain and channel it into something good, and create something with it.
I share that because I think, first of all, we don't really realize how much people's careers can be impacted by things that have literally nothing to do with what they studied or what their paycheck is. There's some other motivation, right? Some intrinsic motivation. For me, it was, how do I do something for the common good, for the benefit of people, in memory of my grandmother. And so I think we understate the fact that there are lots of outside influences like that just intersect with people's lives, that the plan that you may have thought when you graduated with that bachelor's degree and crossed the stage is maybe not the plan. And that's okay, right? Staying open to that can bring you to different places in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important, being able to change and adapt and just, be able to not just go with the flow, but just like embrace it, Yeah.
And if you can't do that today in 2025, you're going to get run over. I would say this was starting to happen with all the advances in technology pre-COVID. COVID certainly had a huge impact on everything, right? And post-COVID has really changed a little bit about the way we work. And I think if you can't look at your industry, your organization, your life, and think about how you can be adaptable to change or prepared to make a pivot, you can't really be stuck in your ways, because the market really demands that today.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, with the pandemic, I feel like every industry has been totally affected by that. And with AI, all of the new things that are coming out.
Wild times.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into nonprofit partners. We talked a little bit about where the inspiration came from, but I kind of want to talk about what it's like now and sort of how you got that idea and where, it's going.
I like to joke that I'm like a serial entrepreneur on business 2 of probably 10 in my head, because I think a lot of creative entrepreneurs are idea generators, right? They have a vision for things. When I was doing my MBA, I was kind of noodling in my notebook about businesses I thought I would start. And for a number of years, when I first moved back to the East Coast, I ran a product-related business. It was actually called Collegiate Care Packs, with two very close friends of mine, and we basically provided care packages for college kids and sent those all over the country with wonderful messages from their family members inside. And we loved doing that. And the business got to the point where we were seeing some pretty fierce competition from huge organizations like college bookstores on campuses and things that didn't exist when we had started. We were also at a point in our lives where we were ready to do some different things. We had family dynamics, young children. And so when we retired that business and decided to close that business and discontinue it, I knew there would always be another business. It was sort of a matter of time. When I was preparing to leave Lourdes and to start my doctorate, I knew, because I can't really do one thing, I kind of joke that busy is my drug. I needed to be involved in multiple things. I think that's how my brain feels like I'm able to contribute. Some places better and some days, others not so much. But I knew that there would be something else alongside my doctorate studies. And so I decided to start consulting. And so, the story of Nonprofit Partners is really almost accidental entrepreneurship. I started consulting myself, wanting to work on projects alongside my doctorate, wanting to work with organizations and people I had been connected to throughout my career. And that's sort of where it began. As it started to grow very organically, I realized that there was going to be something larger than me. And I started to think about what that team looked like. I originally did what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do when they are starting to scale. I looked at who I needed for support, and I brought in contractors and folks that could kind of support other pieces of services I wanted to offer, right? So it might be a web designer or a specialty copywriter, people that would offer complementary skills to me to be able to expand the portfolio of how we could serve clients. And it really just grew organically over the years. We have kind of flexed the organization at times, depending on the demands of our clients. And so I have full-time staff members, part-time staff members, still have contractors, particularly, again, in those specialty areas where I don't need a full-timer all the time. And we use those relationships on a project basis. But we've been able to really work with, we always say kind of not the .coms, right? We're not in it to sell widgets. We're in it to, improve the circumstances of organizations. So we do a lot of work with .orgs, .edus, .govs, really around things that impact primarily the greater good, right? So things like social determinants of health, getting people in healthier communities, getting people access to screenings, getting people education that they may not have had access to before. All sorts of projects that really are falling into the greater good.
So another part of your business is the creative side, and entrepreneurship is something that is creative, even if it's, not writing a book or creating a movie, you're still using your creative skills all the time. So, I was wondering how you're able to implement these creative practices into your business, even when, it might seem like you're working 9 to 5 all day, you're doing these corporate paperwork, all these different types of corporate things. How are you able to implement creativity and sort of inspire your team to be creative as well?
Yeah, and I think there's sort of two sides of that coin. Is the things that I personally struggle with as an entrepreneur are the less creative things. I don't love to do the bookkeeping. I don't like to invoice. I would much rather, and I do have, thankfully, support with a lot of the things. Certainly, I'm not doing my own accounting and taxes. Nobody wants me to teach finance here either, or accounting. I think it's important to know what you don't know or what you don't like, and to think about how somebody who is much more in tune with that can take some of those things off your plate. For me, that helps because I enjoy the creative side so much more than the administrative side. I will say, though, that you can't be creative all the time. Right. So some days, I literally wake up with ideas in my head. Like I wake up and my brain is turning on ideas. Some nights I can't sleep because my brain is still turning on ideas. Right. And I have to sort of brain dump into a phone note or a notepad before I sleep. And I think a lot of probably creative entrepreneurs are that way. But some days I'm just not feeling it. Right. Some days I just wake up and I'm like tired. I didn't sleep well. I've got a headache because the weather patterns keep changing and my sinuses are out of control. And I just have to own that, right? And so I try to really give myself as much structure in the week as I can. I do time block. That's one of the things that helps me stay on track and not get distracted by projects that just seem fun when I have projects that need to get done. that may be more administrative like that. And so I try to block my time out on Sunday nights and look at my week and go, okay, what has deadlines? What, has meetings already booked? And I think about what time exists around that and how I can use that. And then I try to allow myself flexibility to go, if I wake up on Tuesday and I'm really not feeling creative enough to do that thing, can it be done on Wednesday or Thursday? Right. And so I've gotten wise enough over all those years to not back myself up into forced creativity by timeline, padding that to know that some days I'm just going to feel more inspired than others. And so I try to go with that as much as I can. It's funny that you mentioned, writing a book and stuff. I think a lot of entrepreneurs also like me probably have an outline of a book sitting on their computer of things that they think that, other practitioners or industry folks, it would be great for them to know, but that information is not packaged in a way we would package it right now. And so that's on my short list of next things to do when I get some time, which I don't know when that'll be. But I think, being creative keeps it interesting for me. I think that's why I got into the marketing realm. And sometimes people will be like, well, how interesting can marketing be when you're talking about cancer awareness? You can still be creative, even if the topics are a little drier or a little heavier, right? Like, we do work in disease management, and that's not all fun, shiny, happy work, right? It's just the reality of it. I've done that in my career working for cancer and heart. I continue to do that now. And so I think what you really can bring to it is the creativity. And for me, it's always, how do we take this message that we need to get to people and make sure that it lands, right, and is translated, or in marketing speak, decoded by the person in that audience that we're trying to reach the way that we intended. And, the coolest thing over the course of my career is that with all the evolution in technology, there's more ways than ever to do that, right? And so it doesn't just have to be that we used to put it in a print ad and insert it in the newspaper, which makes me sound like a dinosaur. But there are lots of ways to get creative in how we deliver that message, right? Is it audio? Is it video? Is it written? Is it delivered by webinar? And so even when you can't be wildly creative with the content itself, you can get creative in the way the content gets delivered.
I love that you mentioned newspapers. I run the WIT over at Rowan, so it's like always a special place in my heart. I love when people mention it. But,
yes, and I love the WIT. It's beautiful. It's a great piece, and I read it all the time. I think it's always interesting, when I'll say that in class, and people are like, "How old are you that you started marketing?" And they were like still printing newspapers. I mean, that was like the large majority share of our spending budget when I first started, and so times have changed significantly. But I still, having started this journey as a writer and initially as a journalism student, I have such passion for the written word. And sometimes that's in print now and sometimes it's online, right? But I think it's such a critical piece of communication.
It's only fitting that on the Entrepreneurship podcast to talk about your podcast. So I was wondering where your idea for it came from and why you chose to start a podcast on top of, all of these other things that you're doing.
Yeah. That's always, I feel like a question my husband and my mom ask, like, why one more thing? I can't ever resist one more thing. I think for the Mom Shuffle, what was happening was, and it's interesting because we started this right around the time that COVID really kind of came into the mix and changed a lot for a lot of people. But I was looking at the entrepreneurs that I knew. A lot of them were women. A lot of them had children that were still of school age. And we literally were just all day trying to figure out how to shuffle things to meet the needs of everyone. So it was like, if I take this meeting now, then I can drive this kid to practice. And then I can, while that kid's at practice, I can work on these things. And then I can get them from practice and I'll have time. And it was like, and a lot of us were doing that and not realizing, first of all, what it took to do that, right? That's a lot. Motherhood is an entire job of its own, right? Parenting in general, right? Props to dads too. And I was like, we're talking about ourselves in silos. Like, how are you as a mom? How are you as this person in your career, right? Which in a lot of these cases was entrepreneurship, and not how are you an entrepreneur who's a mom. And so as I started talking to people I personally knew in my network, we were sharing very common things. So there were a lot of common challenges. There were a lot of unique approaches. People were finding different ways to meet those challenges. And so I was like, it was interesting to kind of learn from each other. And then I was like, is this a broader issue, right? I'm sure if it's happening to moms that I know, it's happening to moms I don't know, right, who are entrepreneurs. And so we really, over the course of the show, have sort of evolved from just starting that conversation about who are you, how do you run your business, how do you manage your family life, to we spent an entire season doing the 50 states of Shuffle, to talking to a female entrepreneur from each state who was managing building a business and building a family at the same time. And again, like so many commonalities, different unique ideas of how to address them, strategies that people had adapted over time, different circumstances, right? People coming at their businesses fully funded, people bootstrapping businesses, people having really supportive spouses, people being single parents. And so it started to really reveal itself as there's so much in common, but there's all these nuances. And so, people will say to me, like, what I've loved about listening to you talk to all of these entrepreneur moms over the years is there's always something I can relate to. Like in every episode, like someone will say something and I'm like, yes, that's me. I've been there. Or, oh my gosh, I remember when that happened to me and here's what I did. And so I think it's just really relatable to people. Regardless of where it goes, I think what we want to talk about is the reality of what does it look like to be an entrepreneur who's also a mom.
I feel like that's so meaningful too, to be able to tell stories of all of those women. My mom's a real estate entrepreneur and she's the most inspirational person in my entire life, and I feel like, especially with women, I feel like they often get put into a box, like you're a mom, you're a career woman, you're this, you're that. And I feel like it's so important to talk about how women can be multiple things, regardless of what society tries to put you in a box or tell you,
Yeah. And that's wonderful about your mom. I think that's the thing, like myself and then talking to other moms who are entrepreneurs, like so much of it, you want your children to see that, how hard you work, how much you've succeeded, how you can integrate your business into your life and the other way around. It's not always easy. And I think it's okay to see that it's not always easy. I mean, like I had a photo I posted once of my son sweeping the office over his summer school break. And I was like, every business is a family business, right? Like, I mean, every small business is like, we're here and he's off school and I've got to get this stuff done. And I'm like, here's a way you could help me out, bud. Let's get to work. And people, I think that slice of life behind the scenes is like, I can think of all the times I posted my kids, like, here's a late night of me meeting and they're like laying on the floor under my desk reading books. It's just like, that's the reality of it sometimes. And I think, I know they see it. My kids are 12 and 9 now. And so they'll tell me or they'll ask questions about my business. And I think it's important to see that. And it's interesting as I talk to students who are thinking about their careers, so many students who have grown up with entrepreneur parents either want that entrepreneur life because they've seen it modeled or they know they don't, right? There's not a lot of like, maybe I'll be an entrepreneur. It's either clearly like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because my dad or my mom was an entrepreneur and I saw them build this business, or I saw what it took to build that business. And maybe that's not for me, right? Maybe I want to be able to work like a standard 9 to 5 at a corporate job. And both of those things are okay, right? My kids are going to decide to do what they want to do and I'm certainly going to support them. But I think putting it out there is really important. And I do think one of the silver linings of COVID, few and far between, but one is that we started to see a little bit more humanity. We started to round out our picture of people, not just as Colleen that shows up at the desk at the meeting in the conference room, but Colleen that's here on this Zoom, also the kids in the background and the dog at home. And, and so we started to see a little bit more slice of life. And I think that helped people maybe have a little bit more empathy for what it takes to be able to be a parent who's in an entrepreneurship journey.
I was a senior in high school when lockdown happened, and just like seeing even my teachers on Zoom and like seeing like their dogs in the background, it brings everyone down to earth a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we were able to all connect with each other a lot more.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, like over my career, I've had the chance to work with like some really huge celebrities, right? Like you work in the Philadelphia region and the Bay Area. There are, superstar athletes. There are just big personalities. And people would say to me like, I don't know how you're not nervous. And I'm like, because they're just people. Like, and I feel like COVID helped us be like, hey, they're just people. Like your teacher is a person and her cat's going to crawl right across the keyboard in the middle of the lesson. And like, my kids were like popping in on the side of my screen and waving at my students as I was teaching during the week. And I mean, it's different, right? Than it used to be. But I love that, like, that's what I mean by that one silver lining. I love that it really helped people understand people and not just people in the function of their career.
Now, this is kind of a silly question, but who is the coolest celebrity that you've met during your job?
Recently, I think I've met him twice over my career now, and we actually recently recorded him as a guest on the last season of another Rowan podcast, the Simply Dynamic podcast. Ron Jaworski is a really wonderful guy. And a great irony, one of my first jobs when I was home from college one summer was to drive the beverage and snack cart at one of his golf courses. And so I love that when I have been around him, I'm like, hey, it's my old boss, right? Like, it's just like really funny to think about like the opportunity that was given to me for this really fun, wonderful summer job, really funded by the empire that he's been able to build over his career. I like that he's lighthearted and has good humor. He does a lot for this region. I'm a Philly girl at heart, despite having been on both coasts. What I have found in my interactions, I met Joe Montana once and a lot of different athletes. In doing a lot of the work I've done around disease prevention and management, we talk a lot to athletes, right? Because we're thinking about health, physical activity, nutrition, and that's really a sweet spot for successful athletes. I found some of them to be really wonderful personalities. I had the chance to do an event in Philly once with the Heart Association with Brent Selleck, and the kids just completely resonated with him from his time with the Eagles. And I think it's important. I think, like anybody else who's successful, being able to use your platform, again, for good, right? Being able to use that message and that voice that you have for good. And so I think when I think about, the people I've worked with in my career, I've worked with Katie Couric, I've worked with a lot of people. The people that I always kind of have the warm fuzzies for of like, that person's a good person, are the people that are really humble and really well-intentioned, right? And so they're not coming in with that ego of, you should care about me, I'm important. They're coming in and they're saying, hey, I have a platform, how can I use that to help?
You teach, business students and creative students. So I was wondering, what's like one piece of advice that you would give to a student who maybe is about to start their career, maybe just started their time here at Rowan, about building a brand and, being creative for a living, but maybe they don't know what that looks like yet, or they don't know where to get started. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think you just got to start, I think, is the number one thing. I will joke sometimes that I'm working with businesses, partners, individuals who have what I consider to be analysis paralysis, right? We can overthink, right? Well, if I don't know what I ultimately want to be in my career, then I shouldn't start building a brand now because it might not align with what I ultimately want. You are your brand. And so if I had started, if I said my brand was only ever going to be to, work in large retail organizations selling stuff, it wouldn't stand up today. What you really want to think about is, who are you, right? Like, what are your values? What are you interested in? What do you like to do? I think the beauty in creative people is that we might like to do a lot of things. The challenge is we like to do a lot of things, right? And so you can't, in your personal brand, almost be so scattered that people can't figure out who you are, right? So there have to be some common threads. When we're talking to partners about this, we call them content pillars, right? In a formal way. But that's really kind of what you want to be thinking about is, who are you and what are you about? And how can you start communicating that? And so if your Instagram is going to be your platform, that's going to be the place that you're starting to build a brand and get noticed and maybe develop, some aspiration for yourself, what is it on there that's going to help people learn a little bit about you, right? You don't have to follow the formula that everyone's published online for how to be an influencer, right? You get to make those decisions for yourself. And the more you stay true to yourself, the easier it gets to be able to build that brand.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for coming in and sharing your story and advice with us today. I'm so inspired. I feel like I connected so much with you and, your story, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person. And, I feel so motivated now to go after my creative ideas. And I'm just so inspired. But thank you so much for joining us. And stay tuned for the rest of the season to hear from more creative powerhouses just like you.
Thank you for listening. Rowan is proud to be an official knowledge hub of the International Council for Small Business. Our AACSB award-winning entrepreneurship programs challenge students to solve real problems in bold and impactful ways. If you're interested in supporting entrepreneurship at Rowan or want to get more involved by hiring an intern, speaking to a class, or being featured as a case study, contact us at rcie@rowan.edu.